Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we're back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have When American Empire Sees Oil from Freds.com, posted by Fast Seaward Venus 739, and that's a cross post from the Anarcho-Capitalism subreddit. And they had a good brief read. This has been a build-up for the past 25 years or so of Venezuela. And yeah, I guess I would agree with that. The American people, the American government might say this is about liberating Venezuela, but it's definitely much more about the oil than anything else. And that's my thoughts on that issue. You always have to be focused on what the special interests want, and the special interests definitely probably are most concerned about oil and the U.S. global hegemony rather than liberty for the Venezuelan people. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Trump and Melania play right into Michael Wolff's hands as her Epstein lawsuit backfires big time. Voila, Wolff now has subpoena power to demand full disclosure on their Epstein relationship, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross post from the Epstein subreddit. And I guess that's the guy saying a video of the guy saying that, I guess. And yeah, personally, if people want to file a lawsuit for any reason, I think they should be able to. But that being said, I don't think the courts are going to be or should be viewed as an arbiter of justice, as I've gone over many times in the past. Ultimately the state controls them, and they can rule however they feel like, and they'll oftentimes rule in favor of whoever has state power. And I definitely think you'll see that a lot if there's ever any cases in relation to Epstein. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the sole authority to approve military strikes against foreign countries. That separation of power is fundamental to American democracy, not an optional arrangement for presidents to discard when it's politically or logistically inconvenient. From Reason.com, posted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-post from the We the Fifth subreddit. And yeah, I would agree with that personally, but the Constitution, presidents have been ignoring it pretty much since ink was dry, and I don't think they're gonna start trying to change that. Ultimately, I think it's interesting. Reddit says that is all about how bad Trump is, but it's much more par for the course than anything. Obama pretty much did the same thing in regards to Libya. And Bush pretty much did the same thing in regards to Iraq, but Reddit tries to push Trump as this unique evil in regards to Venezuela. Well, in reality, it's as I've stated, it's much more par for the course than anything else. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have beginning to realize that the solution is absolutely always less government, even for wealth inequality, leftists are angry about, posted by MaximumHat2389, and that's a cross post from the Monarchy subreddit, and they said, I'm a 30-something millennial, like many people my age. I'm broke, overworked, and continually feeling defeated with no help from either major political party in sight. I can't help understand the anger many people are feeling towards billionaires, making them jump on the socialist train. I'm certainly not happy with the approach to the world's first trillionaire on the rise. That's all being considered, and frustrations from the young left being understandable. I still don't see how simply taxing the rich will do anything at all. We can tax them all we want, and we will still have billionaires and probably trillionaires. It's rather obvious that once someone comes into that kind of money, the ways in which to keep expanding on the capital are particularly infinite. When I think about this problem with wealth inequality on such a grand scale, while trying to ignore the biases of people on the right who praise billionaires and also ignore the biases on the left who want to literally use guillotines on them, I realize something. How could creators even monopolize a product efficiently enough to own billions in its assets without government? Almost every billion-dollar corporation I can think of, or any monopoly on entertainment, food, and grocery, consumers hate them. Consumers are all fed up with Netflix. They're fed up with energy companies overcharging on their electric bill. I can list thousands of examples of this. Most services that American consumers are having to deal with are not providing the services as efficiently as the consumers want them to. After pondering this for a while, it hit me, especially while thinking about the injustice the only energy company is inflicting on consumers in my small city. We don't have enough choices as consumers. There's actually a law in my region that has allowed an energy company to be the only company consumers can use. It's literally illegal for competition to sweep in and offer consumers a cheaper deal. I can guarantee you that the very day this condition would be allowed, this energy company would lose billions. The people in my city are absolutely fed up with this energy company to the point of repeated property damage on its premises. All this in mind, I can't be certain that without all the government regulation that civil competition that billionaires wouldn't exist, but would definitely be much harder for a company to monopolize that level of wealth. And I'd agree with that. I think personally, as I've noted in the past, I think big business and big government are oftentimes one and the same, and that's definitely important to remember when it comes to wealth inequality. It's as George Carlin famously said, "It's a big club and you ain't in it." And a lot of the rich elites are the very same in big government are the same ones that have friends in big business, the rich elites in big business, and it just goes to show you that not all the rich elites are statists who want to control you, but definitely a decent chunk of them are, and that's very much how you need to view it. If someone seeks to use the government to control you, and a lot of times they're the same type of rich elites who give contracts to their buddies in big business, and that just goes to show you that the people really running the show it really doesn't matter whether they're in the private sector or the public sector. Ultimately they seek to control you and your way of life, and that's very much not a libertarian position. Not as I stated, not all rich elites are like that. Some of them are more on the libertarian side. Elon Musk is one I would say is more libertarian than not as much seeking to control people. I guess you'd argue he does control one of the biggest platforms for online discussion in X, but definitely compared to a lot of other billionaires, I would say he's not as bad as them when it comes to seeking to control people through the government. He did run the Department of Government Efficiency for a while in that regard, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have All About Epstein. Carville tells Trump invaded Venezuela for a simple reason from Salon.com, posted by The Way to Beauty. And yeah, I definitely do think the Epstein files might have played a role in why Trump pushed for an invasion of Venezuela. They wanted to distract from the Epstein files. But with that being said, I think people are going to stop talking about the Epstein files and move on to Venezuela now for a bit. People always talk about whatever the current thing is, as I think I went over in the last episode. It's whether on the left or the right, it's always whatever the current thing is. And now the current thing is no longer Epstein; it's Venezuela. Regardless, I don't think that anyone's going to be held accountable for the Epstein files, regardless. And as I've stated many times, Reddit only cares about the Epstein files because Trump's in them. If Trump wasn't in them, Reddit would sweep them under the rug constantly because a lot of their friends are in there, like Bill Clinton as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Pentagon cuts Senator Mark Kelly's military retirement pay as punishment over illegal orders video from CNN.com, posted by CH Relax and premises the they shall not speak the truth about the king. And yeah, personally, I don't. I personally do think what Kelly said was a little risky. You should just if you're in the military, you shouldn't be telling people to disobey orders. But ultimately, I do think, they shouldn't be cutting his military retirement pay, but ultimately the government can cut whatever it wants to, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have the blinking siren emoji. Furious world leaders give final warning to Trump, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a video from Midas Touch, and they added, this video hits on all the points of why what Trump is doing is not just insane, it's straight up going to get the U.S. in trouble with their allies. And yeah, personally, Reddit's always like, oh, Trump's gonna get us in trouble with all the allies, but Reddit, they've been on that same thing for the decade, and ultimately, I think the West is much more stable than Reddit would have you believe. The West, Reddit's always like, oh, Trump's going to get us out of NATO and all that. But in reality, I think a lot of it's just theater. Trump's saying, oh, we're going to invade Greenland, but, they're not really going to invade Greenland because Greenland's partition of Denmark, which is also in NATO. So, I think that's all just theater. A lot of what Trump does, as I stated I think I stated this before, but I had a good comment on this recently. Where was it? I'm seeing if I can find it. Trump's megalomaniacal WWE heel shield has always been theatrical bait that Redditors take every single time. Oh no, he's putting his name on the Kennedy Center. He's literally Hitler, and that's very much like when it comes to a lot of his stuff like Greenland and all that. He always just wants to bait people into whatever the current outrage is, and Redditors take the bait every single time. Next we have LP of Ohio Facebook gets jokes, posted by Cowdog Curmudgeon, and that looks like a chart, and it says liberal and it says, and then as an arrow says, it points to start a business, and it says libertarian, and the libertarian arrow says fired, and it goes back to liberal. Meanwhile, the libertarian has kids, and it points to conservative, and the conservative has an arrow that says arrested and points to libertarian, and the conservative also has an arrow pointing to, it says medical, and points to liberal, and liberal has an arrow that says mugged and points to conservative. And I would agree with all that. Ultimately, people are always going to be subject to whatever their own experiences in regards to their politics, and I definitely think you see that when it comes to what external factors are happening, like if you're having kids or having medical bills or if you're mugged, and I would very much agree with this chart, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Most Americans Right Now, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a cross post from the Newsom Massacre subreddit. And it says, I do not want Venezuela, I do not want Greenland, I do not want Cuba, I do not want Canada, I do not want Mexico, I just want healthcare. And yeah, personally, I would agree with the first part of that. I don't want I don't want the U.S. getting involved with all this foreign interventionism like it does seemingly under every presidential administration, regardless of party. But, ultimately, I think the libertarian position on healthcare is that, it needs to be allow for as much choice as possible, individual choice as possible, just like everything else. If people want to have the government pay for their health care and they want to put aside taxpayer dollars for that, I think that's fine. But as I've stated in the past, the private sector does need to be an option as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, as a libertarian, this is my fucking nightmare, posted by Squash is Often Good, and they said, I would call myself center-left, far libertarian. Mutualism is the most agreeable theory I've found thus far, but TBH, this is only an approximation. I feel like I'm going insane. The world I live in, the country I live in, is everything the party libertarians warned me about when I was a teenager. The government is turned tyrannical. There's a legion of cronies talking about bringing about revelation through mass surveillance. Free speech is dead. We have an expansionist dictator. The guys in charge serially rape and pimp out kids. All of these ultra-rich guys seem to want a one-world government. We even have our TVs listening to us. Am I fucking crazy? Where is libertarian outrage? Where is the defense of liberty? What was it really all about? Dog whistling about the Jews? Do they really not mean it when they talk about authoritarian conspiracies? When I was coming up, the libertarians were all crony capitalism bad. I believe gay couples should be able to defend their marijuana plants for 15s. My first girlfriend was an LP USA pro-sex first feminist. Looking into it, they even had a sizable mutual swing decades ago. What the fuck happened? Why are almost zero libertarians freaking about the state of the world? Why are so many of them celebrating, especially when it comes to the tech pro segment? And, I like what this guy commented on the post. Technically correct, too. He commented, libertarian outrage in the same place it was when the previous administration strong-arming social media to censor people. Most libertarians were outraged then and are outraged now. The problem is that most people aren't libertarian and actually like censorship when it's their side doing it. And I very much agree with that. Pretty much everything, despite what Reddit and a lot of sensationalist media would have you believe, this is much more par for the course than some unique time in U.S. history. Trump, outside of being kind of a spaz and constantly baiting people with outrageous statements, Trump is much more like Obama or Biden than I think a lot of people would care to admit, especially when it comes to policy. They're both gonna bomb the shit out of foreign countries. They're both gonna, push for America to be the global hegemon. And yeah, I personally don't really care for it, but at some point you just kind of get numb to it all. It's all pretty much. It's all pretty much same shit, different president. It doesn't really matter who the president is. I think they're mostly a figurehead first and foremost, and that the deep state and military-industrial complex is the really running things. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have, what if we were wrong about universal healthcare, posted by Wonderful Regret 252, and they said, check out the recent article on Britain's healthcare problems, or not. Britain is certainly feeling the pain of universal healthcare. Whether some folks here want to acknowledge it or not, there may be some cracks in every universal system upheld as a panacea for healthcare. It's not figuring this as a gotcha. I hate it here in the U.S. I'm probably going to move in a year or so. 42 now and I'm not getting younger. Is there maybe some other option? Something that keeps healthcare out of government's hands? And yeah, as I said previously, my thought is, you gotta have, if you people want the government to be involved in their healthcare, I think they should be able to. If they want to have voluntary taxation spent on government healthcare subsidies, I think they should be able to. With that being said, I think the private sector needs to be an option as well. I think the libertarian option is, let there be as much individual choice in regards to healthcare as possible, but you do have to pay for it. You just no one works for free. I think it's interesting. A lot of leftists say, how could they justify slavery for so long, while also going, where's my free healthcare? And in reality, nothing is free, especially healthcare, because healthcare is particularly valuable because people want to live as long as possible, and that's what they're going to be willing to pay a lot of money for, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Justice Department drops claims that Venezuela's Cartel de los Sols is an actual group from NYTimes.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, the Justice Department has backed off a dubious claim about President Nicolas Maduro that the Trump administration promoted last year in laying the groundwork for moving from power in Venezuela, accusing him of leading a drug cartel called Cartel de los Sols. And yeah, it just goes to show you the government can justify labeling, saying whatever it wants to, and oftentimes, it might not even be true, and sometimes, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.